So right off the bat, this is a big, you guys have all done IQ tests, right? So if you haven't done one, do one. You can do them online. They're stressful because of two factors. And the two factors are each question gets harder. And so you're getting a little more tired. You're getting, this is just a quick digression, but one of Porges's biggest discoveries is what he says, thinking is a whole brain phenomenon, a whole body phenomenon. So when you think, watch a child thinking, concentrating, everything tenses up. And we can actually measure how hard that child is working. His heart rate goes up, his breathing goes up, everything is tensed. Thinking, problem solving is an adaptation of a system designed for hunting. It's the same system, it's the same brain system. So you stop when you get exhausted. That's your stopping point. We'll come back to this because that's the key to everything I want to talk about this morning. Okay. The two things that make this so stressful. Remember our definition of stress. A stress is anything that requires the expenditure of energy. There are two reasons why IQ tests are so stressful. One, each question's getting harder. That's a stress just on itself. So I'm working and I got this one and I had to work really hard. Oh God, I got another one. This one's even harder. So that's a big stress. And the second thing is you got to do it against time. And that's a huge stress. So what we're measuring is not just how far you can go, but how far you can go within 45 minutes? Within a 45 minutes time span. So these two factors are exhausting. Now, what we're trying to do in self-reg is reframe data like this through the lens of the triune brain. This is huge. This is hard. The standard interpretation, the standard theory of this data was purely blue brain. So guys were trying to explain this. There's been many serious attempts to explain these results. And their explanations were blue brain explanations. So they would say something like this. Well, maybe he stops at this point because of mental energy. Maybe there's this thing called mental energy, whatever the hell that is. I almost swore there. And so what's genetically fixed is how much mental energy a child has. And my suspicion is that most of us kind of believe that. And we kind of believe that because that's what our culture taught us. That's what we've heard that message. We've heard that message over and over. Okay, so a group of serious scientists decided, let me test this. Let me test if this is because of your capacity for mental energy that you're born with. And guess what they found? Total bullshit. There isn't such a thing. There's energy, but not mental energy. Okay, that's a problem, so it's got to be something else. And there's an aspect that I'm overlooking here, but what we can do is we can correlate all these correlations between the subtests, and we can come up with one single variable. And what we find is this one single variable predicts how the kid is going to do on any subtest. I know this is more than you need. Okay, so now the question is, what is this single variable that we've discovered through a very sophisticated form of mathematics or statistical analysis? This single variable must be something. So if it's not mental energy, it's called G. So if it's not mental energy, what else could be? Oh, I know. Maybe it's how fast you process information. So maybe what this is about is that some kids, and I see these kids, I got this kid, bang, that kid's got the answer, I got this kid, and I'll come back tomorrow. So maybe what it is that the brain, just hold on to this one for 2 seconds, all right? But maybe what it is that the brain, how fast you're going to process information is genetically fixed. Only it turns out when you start to do the science that there's no science to back that up. So it's not processing speed. Maybe it's how well you process, processing efficiency. Nope, not that either. So what we've had over the last 30 years is really good scientists trying to figure out what the hell is the reason. Why is it good executive functions? There's got to be something about their brain that okay? There has to be something about the brain that explains why this kid got 100. And whatever that thing is about the child's brain, I can't change it. So, and if I'm a Republican, I'm saying that over time, your family will occupy the level of society, the niche of society commensurate with their look, I know this is hard, but I just want to explain one last thing. In Great Society, Maggie, was launched when? 64? 64, 65? The Great Society, which was launched by Lyndon Johnson, is one of the greatest achievements that any democratic society has ever done. It was an attempt, and it was launched by Johnson, championed by Bobby Kennedy, championed by Bill Clinton, whatever his faults. And this is one of those, the shining beacon on the hill that inspired countries around the world. But the problem was that all of these massive efforts that were done, like Head Start, didn't change IQs. So in 1969, Arthur Jensen wrote an article, and it became sort of the rallying cry for the Republicans. And what Jensen showed in a classic paper was that for all of the trillions that had been spent on these attempts to raise the intellectual potential of the lower classes, quote, IQ scores had only moved about 5 points. That's all they had done. And so Jensen's conclusion was, as a scientist, all I'm telling you is you're spending all this money trying to raise something that can't be raised because it's genetically fixed. So wouldn't you be better spending the money somewhere else? That's really what Republicans are saying. What they're saying is you've launched all these programs. You haven't stopped poverty. You haven't stopped crime. So why are we wasting money on this? Science is telling us that IQ is fixed, that IQ is pretty much an you get the point. Raising an IQ 5 points is hardly worth it. That's what we're fighting. This is the idea we're fighting. What I'm trying to do, the reason why I do all this, Susan said something very misleading last night. I retired from one job because she forced me to. Because the other job was more important. The other job is this. So if I'm not raising IQ, all the things I've done, why not? If I'm trying to shift from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, I don't want to say that IQ is a nonsense, because then I'd be denying fact. And that's not my job. I'm trained not to do that. So I want to revisit my theory. I want to look at this data. And the problem that we see is that the data has been looked through a blue brain lens. They didn't think about the red brain. They didn't think, that's never been considered. Their explanation was always a blue brain explanation. All of these things like processing speed, you're looking at how fast the prefrontal is going to process information. You're looking at memory. Working memory has been a huge one. Okay, so what I'm looking at there is I'm not looking at long-term memory. I'm not looking at the hippocampus. I'm looking at the memory that we're going to store up here, like a computer cache. All of their attempts to interpret this data have been science now. Science has looked at this through a blue brain. And science is the one, and a guy like Arthur Jensen or a guy like Charles Murray, they see themselves as serious scientists. And what they're saying is, this is what the science is telling me. That's what they're saying. So now what we're trying to do is reframe all of these facts by looking at it through the triune brain. What is the role of the limbic system in, so this is the key, okay? I know this is hard. What is the role of the limbic system in where a child stops? An IQ test is basically testing where the kid stops. My children in the Mary study were stopping. Why were they stopping? My answer had to lie somewhere in Porges. Something about what was going on below the blue brain, something in their limbic system. And what we discovered was there is this thing called limbic braking, limbic brakes. The child stops when the limbic brakes kick in. They're like a governor on a car. The brakes stop the kid. So when I have a little guy that I know can go past this point, and I try to push him, and he won't be pushed, it's because his brakes have kicked in. His brakes won't let him. And if I try to override his brakes, I'm going to have a problem on my hands. With some kids, you can override the brakes. Some kids are Sidney Crosby, or all the ones that Angela Duckworth wrote her book about. Steve Young, whoever she chose. This is, it is 1 out of a million that is a 1 out of 10 million that becomes a Sidney Crosby. So 1 out of 10 million, you can override the brakes and not hurt the child. For the other 9,999,999, oh my God. And I'm kind of, I would love to have my own son be a Sidney Crosby, but I'm sort of reality-based in my parenting. Not a Sidney Crosby.